Numbers. And I would invite you to join me as we look together at this passage that falls in the midst of instructions given to the leadership of the nation, this newly constituted people of God, and specific instructions God has for the high priest and the others who are priests who will lead in worship and send people on their way at the end of worship. Starting with verse 22 of chapter 6, Numbers 6, 22 and forward. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, Thus you shall bless the Israelites. You shall say to them, The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So they shall put my name on the Israelites, and I will bless them." I will say to you at the outset that this blessing means a great deal to me, and for very personal reasons. Back in the last year of my graduate work, when I was writing my dissertation, and fresh off of a very challenging previous year when, as pastor of Grafenberg Baptist Church in Shelby County, Kentucky, I and other leaders of the church had to confront some extraordinary difficulties with a staff person who, in 6 months' time, had undermined the trust fabric of the church and actually spilled a poison into the atmosphere that suggested that God had called him there to get rid of me. Had issued in a conflict that was a devastating conflict in many ways, and we were able to resolve that leadership issue, but by the end of it, I was exhausted. Didn't have the inner strength to carry on, and I submitted my resignation, not even sure exactly whether Priscilla and I were going to be able to make ends meet. By this time, we had both our kids and obligations of life that carried on. Didn't know how it would happen. But with the support of family and friends, we were able to settle into Louisville, and I was able to move into the last year of my studies and begin a healing process that became transformative for me, that helped me appreciate the grace of God in ways I never had before, and to feel the love that was unconditional, because so much of my life had been rooted in my own achievement, my ability to justify my existence. And it was in that context that Priscilla and I found our way into the life of Highland Baptist Church in Louisville, Kentucky, where a friend of mine, a colleague in ministry and a friend a little older than I and not long out of seminary himself, was the pastor of the church, a extraordinarily gifted young man and pastor with special gifts as a preacher. And he did something special every Sunday. Most of the times when a benediction was offered, in fact, basically my only experience of a benediction at the end of worship was for the pastor to say, would everybody close their eyes and bow their heads, and then there'd be some prayer, either spoken loudly or mumbled, and we'd go on our way. The benediction for me represented that it was almost time to get out the door. And antsy as I always was as a kid, I was eager for the punctuation point that would let me know that the time for falling asleep on my dad's shoulders had come to an end and I could get on with life. But in this particular year, I came to appreciate that benediction could be so much more. That there was power in those words. And Paul Duke, the pastor and friend, each week at the end of worship would stand before the congregation and with eyes open, inviting the congregation to keep their eyes open, with his arms stretched out, would offer this blessing that is rooted deeply in the people of God and their history. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. And I want you to know that when I heard those words, as I looked forward, as all the congregation had, it was like I was being showered with grace. It was flowing into me, and it would bring tears. It was the reassurance that I was in God's hands, in God's good hands, in God's unconditionally loving hands. And I will never forget what that feels like. A benediction has never been the same to me since. Something in us longs for a blessing. For want of a blessing, people go off the rails and into dark places in self-defeating pursuit of things we sometimes don't even know or recognize. And at the base of it, down in the root system of it, the source has been an unrequited longing for a blessing never given. How much of our fretfulness, how many of the pursuits of our lives have come from a restless heart that hasn't experienced the peace, the rest, the blessing of God? And from the people we love who embody that love and that grace and that blessing. We long for a blessing. And it's an interesting thing to consider. Why is a blessing so powerful? Well, we could trace the significance of it and carry on our whole lives and never fully absorb all of the richness of what it means, but just consider a bit that a blessing matters so much because, for one thing, we want to be wanted. We want to be valued. We want to have our worth reflected back to us in ways that take us off the spinning wheel of an effort to justify our existence and simply be. And simply be at peace with who we are because the one who created us loves us. It's interesting, and I don't remember whether I've told you all this story, but I'm one of 4 boys, you know that, and I think I've established that after the first son was born, there was a 5-year gap, and then it was just one after the other. I mean, Mom became an assembly line of delivering boys into the world. 1952, 1953, 1954, just like that, and it was done. And I was born 1 year and 11 days after my next older brother. I'm the youngest. I was the end, the caboose, the that's it. And for all the years of my life, I had these off and on thoughts, and as I got older especially, I kind of wondered about how Mom must have felt when she first found out she was pregnant again. And I finally thought to ask my mom in the last couple of years of her life. I think it was only 2 years before she died. I said, Mom, I have been curious all these years what it must have been like for you to discover you were pregnant again. And I don't think I used the word pregnant because she hated that term. Heavy with child, I think, was her preferred. And Mom was not a sentimental woman. But I asked her, in fact, I said, I would have to guess that it took you a little while to get used to the idea that you were going to have another child. She totally blew me away with her response. She said, no, just the week before I went to the doctor and found out I was expecting again, I was outside hanging the laundry. Those were the days. And a breeze came across. It was a gentle breeze. And I had this inner lift of my spirit, and I thought, how lovely it would be to have another little boy. Oh my goodness. I did not expect that answer. But I want you to know I'm glad I asked. I was blessed. I was blessed. I had the sense of my worth from even before I was born. You know, David reflects on that very fact in Psalm 139. I encourage you to read it again sometime, where he stands in awestruck wonder at the miracle of life, the miracle of his own life, how he is encompassed about by the love, the grace of God, and how God knew him before he was born, as he was being woven in his mother's womb. And David places the creativity of God all the way back at those founding points, where our worth is established. The Creator God, who flings the stars into the heavens, is not so busy with the bigness of it all that he can't continue to take time in the creation of every child who was ever born. Each a unique creation, God's handiwork. And it is the delight that shines on our brows that we are not only the children of our parents, we are sons and daughters of a God who made you and me unique, each and every one of us, and loves us with a fatherly love from before we were born. We are blessed. We are blessed. Wow. So, one of the reasons a blessing means so much is that it establishes our worth. And I will say a parenthetical note or two throughout this message to those of you who mark these achievement points, like graduate from high school, from college, from graduate school. You are blessed. And it's not just your achievement that names you as one of the blessed. You're blessed from your very birth and from before your birth. Who you are, unrepeatable, is a miracle granted by God, who holds you in the ultimate Father's arms and loves you with an undying love that isn't contingent on where the road takes you. So that is, for sure, one of the reasons words like this mean so much. We want to be valued. And there's something else that goes on, because we want a blessing because we want those who matter to us to wish us well. Isn't that important too? To have the good wishes, the goodwill of others means the world. In a world that can beat us down, that can communicate to us sometimes how we fall short, who are reinforcing the worst qualities in us and ignoring the best qualities in us, in the face of voices that sometimes even project doom or some just desert in the future that is a malevolent bad wish. Isn't it nice to have the oasis of the voice that says, I do not wish you harm, but I wish you well? And this morning, Julie, in sharing, Gayla at the outset of worship, sharing the scripture text from Jeremiah chapter 29. I know the plans I have for you, to give you a future with hope. Plans for welfare, not calamity. God's language is a language not of cursing, but of a blessing. We long for that. We long for that. The reality is, some of us long for it in ways we don't get. Some of us are in environments where those who were there to love us didn't know how to love us in ways that got through. There's a song by Paul Simon called Slip Sliding Away. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but there's a verse in that song And Paul Simon, to my books, is one of the great poets of the rock era. But he says, there was a father who had a son. He longed to tell him all the reasons for the things he'd done. He went a long way just to explain. Found his boy while he lay sleeping, kissed him on the forehead, and he turned around and headed home again. It was a kiss. It was a blessing. It was delivered to someone who didn't even know it had happened. And he headed home with a blessing unspoken and not received. And we long for the blessing, don't we? We long for the goodwill, for the favor, for the good wishes, for the good fortune, for the hope. And there is one other thing that's worth saying, that we long for a blessing because we want some reassurance that the forces of the universe wish us well. That the forces of the universe are lined up in our favor. This is a complicated world, is it not? There are lots of things that happen out there. And I remember when my kids were getting close to graduation, I just wanted to tuck them in under my arms and keep them and protect them. I just wanted to create a cocoon of love and protection and just hold on to them forever, because I knew I was going to have to let them go. And that when I let them go, they were going to move into a complicated, dangerous world. That there would be spaces and places that didn't wish them well, and there'd be choices they made that were irreversible. There were dangers around every bend. There were problems they couldn't imagine. And I just wanted to keep the family system intact. I wanted hope. And for them, I wanted assurance. That as they moved into that world, they would be tended by a God who wished them well, who would align the forces of the universe for their well-being. We long for a blessing, don't we? Oh, we long for a blessing. And guess what? Here it is. We long for a blessing, and God delivers that blessing. Delivers the blessing in spades. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Understand, just to move through this briefly so that we can pick up on the key traces of what is happening with these words. God, through the priest, offers the blessing. And in doing so, offers more than just a hope. This isn't just a man standing in front of the worshiping, gathering people and saying, I hope the Lord will bless you in the days ahead. Of course, the Lord may or may not bless you, but I want you to know that I sure wish you well. That's not what's going on here. I mean, these would be nice sentiments, even at that, right? I mean, we'd receive them, we'd be grateful, but that's all. But this is authorized by God to speak these words. And as such, these words are much more than just a human being's nice sentiments on our behalf. They represent God's own favorable disposition toward those who look to God as Lord. Given that God instructs these words to be spoken, they come as more than hope, they come as more than promise. What God wills with these words actually begins to happen through these words themselves. So like road-weary travelers, we find ourselves plunged into a refreshing spring of life. God blesses us, bestows God's favor in the moment the words are articulated. Consider the power of words. It's just in the terms that we've described. But it struck me as I've studied this text this week again in preparation for this morning's message, that there are lots of ways that the blessing can come, and not just in words. Words are what we hang on. Words are what we want so badly, but consider that a blessing is part of the language of love, is it not? And someone who has become a friend of Priscilla's and mine, whom we admire so much, the popular writer of one of the great books for relationship today called The 5 Love Languages. How many of you have read the book or know about it? The 5 Love Languages. If you don't know it, get it. It's great for couples, but he has multiple books that talk about all the various expressions of it. There's more than one language of love, and words are not the only one. In addition to words, there's quality time. There are acts of service. There are gifts. And there's physical touch. And it struck me that God has bestowed God's blessing, God's love in all of these languages. And sometimes we miss the blessing because it didn't come with words. Consider, if you would, just pause and consider. Blessings, grace, the favor of God that has crossed your path, not with shadows, but with light. Not with difficulty, but with strength through the difficulty. Not with mere provision, but with bounty, with abundance. The serendipities of the joy of life. What are the sources? James, as an author, says, all good things and every perfect gift comes from the Father of lights, with whom there is no shifting or changing, no darkening of the shadow. We are blessed. We are blessed in ways that go beyond words of affirmation, words. Words are definitely a part of it. That's what a blessing is at its best. The gift of a thumbs up for just being who we are, in words and without words, with hugs and with acts of service, with surprising graces. The message that we're valued, accepted, treasured, separate and apart from what we do or don't do, and that the benevolent, loving one will see us every step of the way. Now, here's the next thing that we ought to just acknowledge, that we are blessed and given this extraordinary privilege, not only to receive a blessing, but to give blessings, to be profligate, to be generous beyond reason with the blessing, to allow the blessings we have received in bountiful supply to then flow from us into the lives of others. I was listening to incoming Pastor Rick's message on Mother's Day when he talked about the sponge and how much love we receive, and that there's so much love from God that flows into our lives, that it is to flow into us to the point that it just drips out of us like a sponge that is absolutely saturated with love. And that we in turn are to be the ones who then allow that dripping to just flow out into the world around us. It's a lovely image, isn't it? It's our privilege to be people of blessing. Those who have gladly, hungrily received, to make it our way of life. The power to bless is right here stated in this passage, because the instructions are given to the priest, right? The priest is to offer the blessing as the people in their worship prepare to go their ways into their worlds. I love my priestly ministry. As one who has been ordained by God for pastoral service, it's one of the things I enjoy most, the privilege of bestowing this good news of God's love into the lives of others. What makes it even better, and what I've come to appreciate over time, is that it's not just about generic blessings. Oh, bless you, bless you, bless you, because everybody, after all, is blessed. But no, personalized blessings. Blessings anchored in the particular truth of who you are, unlike anybody else. Personalized. Special delivery blessings that mean so much because it's unmistakable. This is a blessing that couldn't be meant for anyone else but me. And to be able to identify those quirks and extraordinary characteristics that make each of you who you are, and to be able to affirm that, wow, it's a powerful blessing. But would you consider this? That when we shift from Old Testament to New Testament, who becomes priest? Is it just the ordained class who get their degrees and their special endorsements and credentialization so that we can do this fun thing? No. We are, says Peter in his letter, his first letter to the Christians that he wrote to, we are a kingdom of priests. That's incredible, isn't it? We are a kingdom of priests. We get this privilege. We get to bestow the blessing on others. And so I want to say that just as Aaron represents God's blessing, gives voice to a blessing from God, authorized by God to offer the blessing, therefore it's a blessing from God through Aaron and the flags of the United States of America. When a human being blesses another, they're doing God's work. They're offering God's blessing with skin on it. Can we do that? I think there are a lot of people who've already done that, and back to you who are graduates. And back to any of us who felt shortchanged on blessings in our lives. There are people in our world that didn't know how to speak the blessing and who were God's blessing with skin on it for us in ways that went beyond words. The father who teaches a skill, the mother who prepares a meal, the rolling eye of disbelief, and that followed by an embrace that says, even though you drive me nuts, I love you still. Count the ways that we have been blessed, and count the ways through the languages of love we can bestow the blessing. Open your eyes and ears, and open your heart. Receive a blessing spoken by a human voice but sent to you by God. Receive God's blessing and share God's blessing. Whenever, wherever, bestow the blessing to others. The Lord bless you. Keep you. The Lord be gracious to you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Thank you, Lord, for these words.